Has there ever been anything in your life that you've tried really hard to start over and over again, but you've really struggled to continue or to finish? I have something of a love-hate relationship with dieting. Now, I've known for years that many aspects of my life would be better if I were to get more into shape, to which I have generally responded to myself that I am in shape. Round is a shape. No. All joking aside, for me, rhythms of exercising regularly have always come much more easy than dieting regularly has. And it isn't that I don't want to be healthier or eat healthier or snack less. It's just that so often I find myself starting really strong. I make good decisions, and sometimes I even make good decisions long enough to see some initial results. But then I'll have a really good reason not to make a good decision with my eating, like going to a birthday party or having a family lunch, or my kids asking me if we can have pizza for dinner. And I'll set to the side my commitment to make better decisions with my eating. But just this one time, except that now I've ruined my diet. And so the next time I think, if I'm ever going to cheat again, probably right now is the time to cheat, and then I'll get back on my diet. And before you know it, I've completely fallen off the wagon. And now the guilt sets in, and now the enemy is whispering in my ear that this is just one more example of my lack of self-discipline. And I'll never again be able to run and play soccer with my kids in the yard. And I might as well just deal with that reality and accept it. And then I stop choosing a healthier diet and a healthier lifestyle. And instead I choose chocolate or Coca-Cola or the convenience of popping something in the oven at 425 degrees for 13 to 15 minutes. There have been so many times that I have decided to get healthier. And don't get me wrong, I know I'll never actually get healthy without deciding to get healthy. But the decision to eat healthy that hopefully I'm going to make in a few hours when I choose what to have for dinner tonight, that decision is only as valuable as what I choose to eat tomorrow morning, or the decision that I make tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening. That's how it is with big life changes. Very few life changes can be made with a single decision, or at least not the good ones. Now, you can absolutely ruin your life in a single decision. You can go to prison with a single bad decision. You can make your marriage very difficult with a single bad decision, but most of the good changes aren't single decisions. They are recurring decisions. In our LifePoint worship live streams, we've been working our way through some of Jesus' parables and talking about what it means to lean into God's kingdom. This morning in Luke chapter 14, we find Jesus in the midst of a string of parables revolving around what is important in the lives of those who thought that they wanted to follow him. And what we're going to see Jesus teaching his audience this morning is that when it comes to following him, your decision to take your first step is only as valuable as today's decision to take today's steps. This morning, whether it be in your online Sunday school class or today at the lunch table with your family, take a minute and discuss the following question with those around you. What is something that you have always found it easy to start, but difficult to continue or to finish? Let's read our passage together this morning from Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 35. I'm reading from the New International Version. You read from whatever you have.
Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, Everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear."
Now, the first thing that should stand out to us about this passage is that Jesus starts off this segment of teaching by saying, if anyone does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, and even his own life, then he cannot be my disciple. Okay, so let's admit, this is problematic. Why would Jesus want us to hate our family? And even if that's what we thought this was saying, doesn't Jesus say that one of the greatest commands is to love our neighbor as ourselves? Why, yes, he does. And no, Jesus doesn't want us to hate the members of our family. What's going on here is that he is contrasting by degree. In other words, he is saying that it's problematic for anyone wanting to follow Jesus to love Jesus less than anyone or anything else. For the audience that Jesus was speaking to, they actually would have been used to hearing the word hate pitted against the word love to show a contrast. We see this in multiple stories throughout the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. But what would have stood out to those listening to Jesus would have been his statement that those who value anything above Jesus could not be his disciple. The Greek word here is the word dynamai, and it means to be able to do something. The implication is not that those who don't value Jesus most won't be allowed to be his disciples. It's that they aren't able to. They won't be able to pull it off. What we're going to see throughout this passage is that Jesus isn't drawing a line in the sand here. He's making an observation. Jesus follows up this really bold statement with 3 parables. The first is about a businessman who begins to build a skyscraper, but doesn't take the time to figure out if he actually has enough money to finish the building. And so halfway through the job, he runs out of money and isn't able to finish. So what does he have now? Well, certainly nothing good. Nothing that is usable to anyone, really just one big hunk of steel that makes the skyline look trashy. Next, Jesus tells a parable of a king who is getting invaded by another nation. And Jesus argues that no one would actually go out into battle without first asking himself whether or not his army could actually stand up against the invading army. And if he didn't think that they could, then he wouldn't go into battle. He would try and strike a deal with the invading king. With the third story, however, Jesus actually goes a step further than just showing the futility of not counting the cost of a big decision. Jesus says this, he says, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's neither fit for the soil nor for the manure pile, and so it's thrown out. Now, in Jesus' day, salt was used for a lot of different things. But the salt that they had was different than the salt that we have today. Most of their salt came from the Dead Sea, and it contained a lot of what's called carnallite, or also known as gypsum. And if you didn't process the salt correctly and carefully, then it would turn out tasting really bad, and it wouldn't be useful for anything. But it was really even worse that bad salt wasn't useful. There were no trash bags or sink drains in Jesus' day. And so things that were bad got tossed out. But when you tossed out salt onto a piece of earth, it made it so that nothing would grow in the soil. And even manure piles, generally good for fertilizer, could be ruined by salt. And so bad salt wasn't just useless, it was kind of an environmental hazard. And this is that to which Jesus compares someone who starts down the pathway of following him and then takes a left turn. Let me ask you, why is it that Jesus says anyone who loves his parents or spouse or children or himself more than he loves Jesus are not able to be his disciples? Isn't that a pretty radical statement? Isn't that kind of like saying to a prospective dog owner, if your new puppy isn't the absolutely most important thing in your entire life, then you shouldn't own a dog? Or if being on a baseball team isn't the most important thing in your life, then you shouldn't play baseball. But the difference between owning a dog or playing baseball and following Jesus is that the decision to follow Jesus encompasses everything else. It changes everything else. And the decision to follow Jesus costs us everything. In our culture, we commonly hear that grace is a free gift, but the truth is, it isn't. Grace is enormously expensive. In fact, God's grace costs us everything that we have and everything that we are. It costs us every aspect of our identity. The decision to follow Jesus means that I am choosing to identify with Jesus above and before any other aspect of my identity. And that any benefit that I would normally get from any other aspect of my identity, I am choosing to potentially forego that for the sake of following Jesus. As an American in this country, I have the right to free speech. But as a follower of Jesus, there are times when I set that right to the side for the sake of being faithful to him. As a postdoctoral graduate, I have the right to claim the title Dr. Ben Northcutt. But as a follower of Jesus, I often forego that right to that title. And honestly, I am thrilled to forego those rights because the rights and benefits afforded to me as a follower of Jesus so far outweigh all of the benefits of all of the other aspects of my identity. Yes, following Jesus is enormously expensive and costly. But even giving up everything that I have and everything that I am, I still don't have enough to buy God's grace, to earn God's grace, which is why grace is a gift I don't deserve. Grace is God's undeserved favor. Not that it's free, but that even costing me everything, I still don't deserve it. One of my favorite movie scenes, and admittedly, I have a lot of favorite movie scenes, but one of my favorites is from the miniseries Band of Brothers, about a company of soldiers in the European front in World War II. And in this scene, a particular private is confessing to his lieutenant about how he hid in a ditch filled with fear during the U.S.'s invasion of Normandy. And you see the lieutenant look down on this soldier in his foxhole, and he says this. He says, "Do you know why you hid in that ditch, Private? You hid in that ditch because you think there's still hope. But Private, the only hope you have is to accept the fact that you're already dead. And the sooner that you accept that, the sooner you'll be able to function as a soldier is supposed to function." And in this moment, the audience senses both the weight of the situation in which these men find themselves, and the audience also senses that for these two soldiers, the only way to find the freedom to do what they have to do is to set aside everything other than what is required to be a good soldier. To set aside the hope that they may get to go home. To set aside the hope that they may get to see their families again. And some of the soldiers in this film, they make it through the war. And the irony was that in order to do what they had to do to make it through the war, they had to give up the hope that they would make it through the war. For you and I, most of us won't have to give up our families as a part of following Jesus. Most of us won't have to give up our jobs or our homes or our own lives for the sake of following Jesus. Now, some of us will. In fact, having a multicultural, multinational family like LifePoint, some of our LifePoint family actually have given up those things for the sake of following Jesus. Most notably, some of those who have come to the Twin Cities from other parts of the world. But the only way to find the freedom that Jesus teaches about is to set down everything that we have and walk away from it. Verse 33 of Luke chapter 14 states, "Any of you who does not give up everything that he has cannot be my disciple." The word give up is the Greek apotasso, and it literally means to abandon or to walk away from. And the way that the verb is structured in this verse, apotassomai, implies a continual action, to be consistently abandoning, to be consistently walking away from. Last week, we did an activity where we looked at the way that we ascribe value to money as a source of security or enjoyment or status or control. And we mentioned how none of these are bad things, but how Jesus is the best source of all of those things. In a few weeks, we'll look at Jesus' teaching about a man who came upon an enormously valuable treasure. And we'll look at about how what we find in Jesus and in following Jesus is absolutely worth everything that I might set aside and more. But what Jesus is teaching here today is that we can't afford to fool ourselves. Jesus, and more so living in his kingdom, costs us everything. And the most common thing that prevents someone from seeing the kingdom of God around them right now, today, is all the other things that are more important to them. Jesus' message in Luke 14 isn't one of somber self-denial. Jesus is saying you get what you pay for. And for those who are only willing to walk away from a few hours per week and a few dollars per month, clearly don't understand what they're missing out on. Jesus is saying that everything that he promises that comes along with the life that he offers is what naturally happens when we more than that, when we consistently, moment by moment, walk away from everything else and embrace him. As we begin to wrap up the formal part of our time together this morning, take a few minutes and ask God to show you what it is in your life that is preventing you from enjoying the fullness of the benefits of belonging to him. Not the bad, sinful things in your life, but the good things that you're just allowing to stand between you and all that God has for you. As our team leads us in worship, come to Jesus this morning. Wherever you are, come to him in humility. Ask him to show you himself first, and then what it is that he wants to tell you or show you this morning. And then decide now, ahead of time, to act in obedience, not if, but when he shows you.